to Reading with the Pastor. This is number 4.
Yes.
We're really 5 because we did an intro, but this is chapter 4. That was just it didn't count.
Yeah.
Just an intro. And I noticed you're wearing the same thing you wore last week.
You know, laundry, it's just difficult to do.
Okay.
I've never quite figured it out.
Yeah, that's fair. Or it could be that we're doing this the same day as the other video. But just ignore that part of things. All right, real quick. How do you read?
I read one word at a time.
Solid. What I mean is, when you're reading, do you take notes? If you look, I'm a highlighter. I'll make little marks. I got a little mark there with my pen. I have little diacritical marks. That's not the right word. Anyway, little critical notes.
Right.
Diacritical is something else altogether. Ignore that.
Well, as we talked about last week, 8 minutes ago, I prefer ebooks. And so when I'm reading, I usually have a Google Doc open, and I'll copy quotes that I like, jot down notes in there, and just kind of use that.
Okay.
I find that works a lot easier. My handwriting's not very good. So.
Okay. So one of the benefits of ebooks there. So.
Another one.
All right. Well, so we're on chapter 4. The title of it is Able to Sympathize. Speaking of Christ, and this is really a continuation of the Christ priesthood, his priestly role, but it's a little bit different, a different aspect of it. And this is drawing off of Hebrews 4:15 that reads, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin." And of course, yet without sin is really important.
Very important.
But also important to us is that Christ didn't come mechanically.
Right.
He's not a wooden figure. He's not a robot. Right? He came how?
He came as a man. Just like us.
Yeah, taking on our flesh, which is, of course, the word we use that theologically is the incarnation. But where Dane Ortland is going with this chapter is to point us to that verse in particular and Christ's ability to sympathize with us in our weakness and including our sin, right? Without being a sinner.
Right.
And again, really critical distinction there. So what jumped out to you in terms of the way you were thinking, what this caused?
So similar to last week, there's some really good and heavy theology that undergirds everything he's talking about. We like to use the term hypostatic union.
Okay, you do.
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Just that Christ was fully man and fully God at the same time. That he had two natures in one person. And that's really important when we're talking about this kind of stuff, because Christ was able to come not just as an apparition, not just as a demigod type thing, but as a real human being. And yet, he still retained his whole godhood and his whole divinity. He didn't stop being God, and they were just merged together, but rather he was both and. And that's important as we talk about being able to sympathize, because then he could go through the same things we do. He has a really, really good quote on page 47. And he says that Jesus came as a normal man to normal men. He knows what it is to be thirsty, hungry, despised, rejected, scorned, shamed, embarrassed, abandoned, misunderstood, falsely accused, suffocated, tortured, and killed. So every single thing that we go through when we're tired, when we're thirsty, he went through the same, but without sin.
Right. And when you read, you could almost put at the end of that sentence, for us.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right? He did all of that for us. Now, I tell you one thing I was thinking is, here's why we don't read the Puritans as much, is because just getting through one of their titles is challenging. So on page 44, he shares a title of a book, and here it is. This is all of it, the whole title. The Heart of Christ in Heaven Towards Sinners on Earth, or a treatise demonstrating the gracious disposition and tender affection of Christ in his humane nature, now in glory, unto his members under all sorts of infirmities, either of sin or misery. Breathe.
Yeah.
That's a lot. Now, there's a lot of good things backed into that title, so surely it's good in the book as well, but they don't make them like they used to, right?
No.
So, that was just one thing that got me thinking. But how did this move you to the heart of Christ?
Well, Well, I think just thinking of his ability to sympathize with us, and thinking about his just love for us and how it moved him to, leave heaven, right?
Mm-hmm.
To come and deal with the things that we deal with. And also in that, it talks a little bit about how times when we feel betrayed maybe by a family member, when we feel stressed or when we go through things, we can tend to feel alone or isolated.
Okay.
But because of Christ being able to, because he went through these same things, because he has experience, he is with us in that. Not just as a removed, abstract third party who just says, "Well, that's rough, buddy."
Right.
But we have solidarity with him, Dane Ortlund says, because he has gone through the same things himself.
Yeah, and that really jumped out to me. I here one of my marks. I made it next to this sentence on page 48. Our tendency is to feel intuitively that the more difficult life gets, the more alone we are. So that was something that definitely jumped out at me, mostly because it was I experienced it. I felt it, that sense of aloneness when I was going through cancer treatment, and I heard it from other cancer patients as well, that there's just a deep aloneness that seems to be something that a lot of people who are going through it experience, and yet that's the strange thing about feeling alone. You feel like you're on your own in those things, even when theoretically others are.
Right.
But he said just a little bit below, they said Dane Ortlund, that is, said we are never alone, and of course he's saying that because of Christ, right? And so that just really connected deeply with me. Because of my experiences,
yeah.
But I'm thankful for that encouragement.
Yeah, I definitely think we can use the hard things we go through in our ministry to others, whether pastor or member of the church or whoever.
Anyone.
Yeah. So I was encouraged by that as well.
Yeah. I do think that on page 49 he does answer a good question, and certainly anybody reading, pay attention to it. I think it's a good, even though it's very brief, of addressing that sense of, well, what about our sin? Right? How can Christ be with us in that? Because again, as we've emphasized, he's sinless. And he addresses a couple different ways where these things can be true. Right? Christ knew temptation much better than we do, right?
Right.
Because of what happens with us.
Yeah, we give in.
We give in. So, whereas Christ never did. So, that means he experienced the sin the temptation to sin in a different way. And then also the second reason is that he says, I'm going to quote on page 49, our only hope is that the one who shares in all our pain shares in it as the pure and holy one. So, it's good for us to come alongside of each other, and we're called to do that, but ultimately we need someone who has withstood everything.
Oh, yeah.
Right, and can yet still sympathize with us. All right, well, thank you for joining us once again. This was chapter 4 of Reading with the Pastor, Gentle and Lowly, Dane Ortlund's book. We're thrilled to have you with us. Give us your feedback if you have, wardrobe recommendations, or you have a question, maybe a strange word or phrase we've used, theological term like hypostatic union.
Hypostatic.
I prefer hippo. I think that's okay. So another thing that we can debate another time. Hypostatic union or hippostatic union. These are not everyday terms.
Right.
So if you have questions, we'd love to, or just feedback, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.